Welcome to Batya on NewsNation. I am Batya, and we begin with what we learned about America this week. As you watch this, Democrats across the country are gathering for the second No Kings protest, whose goal is to, quote, show the world America has no kings and the power belongs to the people, in what they say is a nationwide push to remind America that democracy means no one is above the law. But America very obviously doesn't have a king. It has a president who is implementing campaign promises that he made in the run-up to an election in which he won the popular vote. Far from being above the law, he has abided by every court decision against him, including the patently ridiculous, including those quickly overturned by higher courts. The power already does belong to the people. The majority of them voted for Donald Trump, and now they are getting exactly what they voted for. That includes the very things that the left is protesting: destroying the threat of toxic drugs being trafficked into the country by terrorist cartels to poison and kill our young people, deportations that protect the wages of working-class Americans, tightening the labor market so workers can ask for more from their employers, support for law enforcement to keep criminals from having free reign of our streets where they routinely victimize the most vulnerable, and tariffs that protect the product of the labor of the American working class, making that labor competitive again in the global marketplace. The left isn't protesting Trump, but the agenda that the majority of America voted for. They aren't protesting a king, they are protesting their fellow Americans. They aren't standing up for democracy, they are protesting it. And it's no coincidence that they are protesting Trump on the very week that he ended the war in Gaza. Let's not forget that this week, which is ending in a protest against a fictional king, began with a very real president pulling off a miracle. He arranged a ceasefire deal and the return of the 20 remaining Israeli hostages held for 2 years in Hamas captivity. I guess the left can't protest a war that's no longer happening. The ceasefire now crowd went eerily silent after Trump arranged this ceasefire. Few and far between were the Democrats willing to credit the president with actually manifesting the thing they had been demanding for 2 years. Instead of crediting the president with his astonishing achievement, they invented injuries to lay at his feet. The No Kings demonstrators are allegedly gathering to protest Trump's abuse of power. But what they're really opposing is his use of strength, peace through strength, be it from foreign adversaries or criminals. No wonder men are flocking to the Republican Party. The Democrats have lost the ability to distinguish between strength and abuse. Here's AOC at a CNN town hall this Wednesday on how Republicans have managed to lure all the men into their party.
And they are able to radicalize and target and exploit a generation of young boys, in particular, away from healthy masculinity and into an insecure masculinity that requires the domination of others who are poorer, browner, darker, or a different gender than them.
It's truly amazing. Here we are in 2025, and they are still trying to blame Trump's success on racism. Sorry, but no. Men aren't drawn to the GOP under Trump because they are deplorables who want to dominate the weak. They are drawn to it because they are drawn to the peace that can only come when your enemies, cartels, criminals, Hamas, or globalization, are having their butts handed to them by someone strong enough to scare the bejesus out of them. My next guest understands this well. Sean Duffy is the Secretary of Transportation and Acting Administrator of NASA. Welcome, Secretary Duffy. Thank you so much for joining us.
It is great to be with you, Batya. Thanks for having me on. Very grateful. Congratulations on the show as well. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So let's begin with this. Is AOC right that the GOP is luring in men by legitimizing their racism and their desire to be kings?
Right, because you have Republicans who say men aren't toxic, right? We want to celebrate masculinity. And what's happened with young men today is pretty remarkable. They've been told you should be responsible. You should respect women. You should get a job. You should work hard. You should actually go back to church. Be honorable. That's what they're called to do by this new movement within the Republican Party, and they've embraced it, which is wonderful. But I love your opening on the No Kings protest, which is actually a Hate America protest. Donald Trump, king, he won the 7 swing states, he won the popular vote, and then everything he's doing, he actually ran on the campaign trail. He told everybody he was going to do this, and the majority of Americans voted for him. This is just disenfranchised Democrats, but also George Soros is funding it. The Socialists of America are funding and supporting it, and so are the Communists of America supporting this rally. So again, it is the offbeat crew that lost and are angry that are going to come and protest and say Donald Trump is a king. No, he's just a great, strong American leader.
So speaking of work and jobs, you oversee a lot of truckers to whom you have become something of a hero. I don't know if you know this, but I've been talking to a lot of them. Your insistence that truck drivers have an English language proficiency in order to have that privilege of driving these big rigs. This is something that is extremely important to truck drivers. It's extremely important to you. You have just withheld $40 million from California over its refusal to comply. Right. Can you explain to our audience why this is so important?
Yeah, so first, just like when you go get your driver's license, you have to take a vision test. And if you don't have 20/20 vision, you're probably going to be required to wear glasses because it's a safety issue. This English proficiency requirement, it's not new. I didn't create it. It goes back a couple of decades, multiple presidents. It's just that I've said I'm going to enforce the law and make sure that there's compliance. And every state in the country who wasn't complying has started to comply, except for one. California has refused to comply and said, listen, we're not going to enforce that rule. You don't have to speak English. You don't have to understand road signs for you to operate in the state of California. The problem, Batya, is those who are licensed in California, they can't speak English or understand road signs, they're getting in trucks and driving all through the other 49 states. And so they're endangering other lives in America because of the rules that California refuses to follow. So we're taking away money from California. We're going to drive safety, even though Gavin Newsom, again, cares more about people who don't speak the language, and it's frustrating. Kind of one last thing, Batya, you mentioned the truckers like what we're doing. There's been companies, family companies that have been operating for 40, 50, 60 years in trucking. They've been decimated. They're about to go out of business. We're losing the American trucking industry to a bunch of people who've come in from the outside who don't speak the language. They've driven down the prices, and now our standard truckers can't make a living wage because of what's happened. Like you, Batya, I stand up for the American worker. I'm going to support them. I'm going to make sure we follow the rules, and they can do great work but also earn a great wage.
I think you're excellently framing this because it's all part of a larger commitment from the administration to what is really a re-Americanization of the American workforce, ensuring that working class Americans have access to the American dream. Now, we're currently in a shutdown, though, and that dream is on hold for a lot of Americans, including a lot of Americans you work with closely, air traffic controllers. I want to play you a clip from a NewsNation town hall this week in which an air traffic controller spoke to the shutdown. Let's have that.
Under the current political climate, do you think that this shutdown could actually be longer than the previous shutdowns due to the external pressures, political pressures that we're having an effect right now? Because I am actually driving DoorDash when I get off work just to kind of make sure I can pay for my daughter's tuition.
So this is Jack, who actually has to drive for DoorDash in order to pay his bills. Now, I imagine, Secretary Duffy, to you, this is an easy question. Well, you know, this is the Democrats' fault, but you're a man who has 9 children. I'm sure at some point throughout your parenting, you get to a stage where you feel a little bit like, okay, I don't care who started it, just put an end to it. What is your message to someone like Jack?
So first off, I'm so grateful for our controllers who last Tuesday got 90% of their pay, not the full 100%. They are not going to get paid in the next round because of this shutdown. And again, for guys like Jack, I'm grateful. But I think it's important for America to understand that we're asking our air traffic controllers to not just work 5 days or 40 hours a week. We're asking them to work oftentimes 6 days, 50 plus hours a week because we don't have enough controllers. And then to think, Batya, that after that they have to go and drive for DoorDash or drive for Uber, so they're going to have enough money to put food on the table or pay their mortgage. It's unacceptable. And they're frustrated. They deserve to be treated better. And I don't think they can reconcile why Democrats want to support health care for illegal migrants and put those people over their paychecks and those people who keep our skies safe. And so, but this is an important point. At some point, you don't care who started it. You want it to end. But you also can't be held hostage. Right? I mean, Mike Johnson and John Thune have said, listen, let's just have a clean CR. Let's open up the government, current funding levels, and let's negotiate over the course of the next 6 weeks. Democrats have said, no, we're going to shut down the government. The difference, though, Batya, is that Republicans are trying to minimize the pain on the American people. Donald Trump's saying, let's pay troops. How could we pay air traffic controllers? What could we do to minimize the pain? Remember back when the shutdown happened under Barack Obama, he made it painful as possible. Put barriers around our open-air museums and monuments and memorials in Washington, D.C., so people who came to see those memorials or monuments, they couldn't go in because of the shutdown. He shut down our trails in the national forests, trying to inflict pain. Republicans don't do that. We're trying to minimize the pain that Democrats are inflicting on our people. I hope Democrats come to their senses really quickly, because yesterday at the DNC, their national headquarters, they're on the rooftop partying, drinking booze, drinking wine, having a yay all the time, all the while American citizens are suffering. It's shameful.
How is the president talking about the shutdown? Is he very anxious for it to end? What does he say to you about this?
So first off, the president's a deal maker. You covered what's happened in Gaza, and he's ended 7, 8 wars. I mean, he's really good at it, and his heart is probably to negotiate. But he understands that if you negotiate with Democrats who are trying to hold you hostage, they'll never stop holding you hostage. And again, especially when Republicans are giving you a clean CR, clean funding. I think he understands that, and he's frustrated. He wants Democrats to come to their senses. But again, he's going to have to wait him out, as is the House and the Senate. And by the way, I lived through these too, Batya. There's a fuel to a shutdown. You don't know when that fuel is going to burn out. I hope, though, that after the Hate America protest that's happening today, that will end and Democrats will come to their senses and let America keep working and keep functioning.
So I have to ask you about some current events. John Bolton was indicted on what sound like some actually very serious charges of mishandling classified documents. Of course, presumption of innocence until he's proven guilty, but these are serious charges. He joins Tish James, Jim Comey, other critics of the president. I guess my question to you is this a scary time to be a public servant? Do you guys ever discuss this in the cabinet amongst yourselves? What's the scuttlebutt on these indictments?
Well, listen, I think it's important that everyone follow the law, right? If you're a Republican or Democrat, just because you serve the public at a high level doesn't mean you get a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's not the way it works. And I think if you even look back to Hillary Clinton and what happened with the classified emails and the bleach bidding of her server and not preserving records, there was a lot there, and she wasn't prosecuted. A lot of people were frustrated by that she was above the law. Donald Trump was prosecuted to the nth degree, and he didn't do anything, but he was prosecuted. I think we want to get back to, hey, listen, let's enforce the law. People should follow it, and I think if that's the model, we'll see what happens with John Bolton. We'll see what happens with Comey, but that should be the standard that we all live by in America.
We had a mayoral debate for the New York City mayoral race. It was Mamdani, Cuomo, Sliwa. Mamdani is pretty much on track to win. Do you have plans to withhold funding, maybe for this new Penn Station overhaul if he doesn't comply with ICE deportations? What can we expect from the cabinet, the Trump administration, from you, if he wins and then puts up a fight on these important aspects of the president's agenda?
Listen, we have certain rules and guidelines by which we operate at DOT. I also work for the president. It's really interesting. Oftentimes, the city of New York has not been that great to Donald Trump during the presidential years. He still loves New York. In his budget, he put in the 2nd Avenue subway. He put in his budget the Gateway Project. He also supports the Penn Station rebuild. Again, we'll have to navigate those scenarios when they come, should they come. I hope that Mamdani, gets past the rhetoric and sees how you can actually govern and how there is a partnership between, state, local, and federal governments. If he doesn't want that partnership, again, we have no problem walking away. Again, it only benefits the city of New York, but I think he would come to his senses because New Yorkers are American citizens, and we have an obligation to support them like we do everyone else across government. And if he's a willing partner, we'll join hands and get those great projects done.
I want to ask you, what is your position on autonomous vehicles and trucks, and then on drone delivery of packages? These are issues that I know a lot of truck drivers are thinking a lot about. On the one hand, technology of the future. On the other hand, it has the potential to displace a lot of working-class Americans from jobs that could secure them a middle-class standard of living. Where do you stand on these issues?
Yeah, so first off, I'm bullish on autonomous vehicle technology. I think it's going to be remarkable. It's going to revolutionize how people and products move. I am cognizant of what can happen with job losses. Right now, there's some testing in some very short-run areas, especially in Texas, to see how it operates. Is it safe? I don't see, though, Batya, from coast to coast or long-run trucks being autonomous. You might have some short hauls, from one close community to another or within a city. Potentially, that's going to be the use of it, not the long distance hauling. Also, with drone technology, it's going to be remarkable. How you get a hot cup of coffee or how you get an Amazon package or a Walmart package is going to radically change. We're going to take cars off the streets. We're going to be able to deliver much faster, much cheaper. And so it's an exciting time. The way, again, products and people move is going to radically change over the course of the next, 2, 3, 4 years. I'm Goldilocks, right? I don't want to go too fast with regulation, and I don't want to go too slow. I want to get it just right. And that's the job that I have to do. And it's more of an art than a science. But again, this technology is going to develop, Batya, and it's going to be in China or it's going to be here. I want us to develop the technology here. I want us to win here. I want the jobs to be here. And so that's what we're doing at DOT, helping foster innovation, make sure it's safe, and see where the future takes us.
Secretary Duffy, may God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Batya. Thanks for having me on.
Right after this, we'll talk to two political insiders about the government shutdown and what Secretary Duffy had to say about it. It's been nearly 3 weeks since the government shutdown started, and there is no end in sight, as both Democrats and Republicans seem convinced that they are winning. But are there any winners really here? He is the editor-in-chief of 2A, Mark Halperin. He joins us, and she is the founder of Blue Stack Strategies and former advisor to House Speaker John Boehner. Maura Gillespie is here on the panel. Thank you both so much for joining me. All right, let's start with you, Mark. We just heard from Secretary Duffy. He talked a lot about the shutdown. He talked also about John Bolton. He talked about a lot of issues, what it's like being a member of Trump's cabinet right now. Did you learn anything interesting from the interview?
I had reinforced my view that in a cabinet of superstars, he's number one. He's the best thing ever to come out of reality TV. He's a great communicator. I followed his career up until now, he's taken to this job. It's not the first job he wanted in the cabinet, but he got one and he's made the best of it, most of it, and it's front and center. It's been front and center almost every month in the administration. He's had some big issue, and I think he's really seized it effectively. And again, you got all these Fox hosts and other people who are great communicators. He's at the top of the list.
Maura.
No, I mean, knowing him as Congressman Duffy, he's fantastic. But it was interesting to hear him talking about, and I'm glad he mentioned the 2013 shutdown. I worked for former Speaker John Boehner, and at the time, President Obama, he refused to talk to Republicans, flat out refused while the shutdown threat, as he called it, was on the table, was still prevalent. So he refused to even discuss with Republicans. And it really is the reverse of what we're seeing play out right now. So for those who are saying that, Democrats need to hold firm, well, but this is the same thing that happened in 2013, and eventually there was a conversation that was had. But largely, Republicans didn't walk away with very much because the threat of shutting down and putting that on the American people really just hurt them in the end. And I think that's what's going to happen to Democrats.
Yeah, Mark, who's winning right now?
Well, the polls have narrowed. The press, because they tend to favor the Democrats, took the early polls that showed the Republicans being blamed a little bit more and turned it into a big thing. It's never been that wide a gap. The latest public polls have shown it narrowed. I think that My sense is the Republicans are more unified and more confident that they can keep their current posture and win this politically and have a deal that they're happy with. The Democrats, I think, are a little bit more fractured, but we're in a zero-sum world, right? Any deal that's done will require Chuck Schumer to say, yeah, Donald Trump was right, or I agree with Donald Trump. And that's just hard in the context of the Republican and the Democratic Party. And in a weekend where they're not talking about the economy or healthcare, they're talking about no kings, that passion, that emotion makes it hard to settle.
Yeah, I think a lot of Americans look at this and they just see the kind of dysfunction that they hate, the sniping, the polarization. This week on NewsNation, we had a town hall that really accomplished the opposite. There were people from across the political spectrum finding common ground. But I have to say that the standout star was John Fetterman. He had a really viral moment that I think got to the heart of it. Let's play that.
I grew up in a conservative part of Pennsylvania, and I grew up and I know and I love people that voted for President Trump. But they are not fascists. They're not Nazis. They're not trying to destroy the Constitution, those things. And that's part of another thing. I refuse to call people Nazis or fascists, or I would never compare anybody to Hitler and those things.
So, Maura, I see that and I think that is where the Democrats should be trying to go. And yet, the next day, there was a headline that actually the Democrats are trying to oust John Fetterman. What do you make of that?
It's unfortunate. I think we've gotten so far into identity politics and blanket statements like that, and where people say all Republicans are trying to ruin the country. You know, we lose respectful dialogue, adult conversations, and productive conversations when we make blanket statements like that, derogatory statements. But putting this label on people we can debate ideas and debate policy and have disagreements, but to go after someone's character simply because you don't like where they stand on an issue, that's just problematic across the board.
Yeah, Mark, help us understand le phénomène Fetterman. I mean, what is going on there with the Democrats? Why can't they see what I see, which is this is what everyone is looking for?
Yeah, I don't know, really. I've covered it and studied it. I don't know how he's gotten to this point where he's saying stuff that not only most Democrats aren't saying, but he's being attacked for. And as you said, they're talking about trying to oust him in a primary. Because what he's saying, of course, 20 years ago would not have been controversial. Whether it's his health issues, whether it's the state he's from, I don't know. I will say, though, that it's very difficult to be for anything Donald Trump's for and still be a Democrat. And they're on the other side of this notion of sometimes you have to do business and politics with people you don't like, but it's not that they just don't like Donald Trump. They think he is evil.
And it's so amazing because Fetterman votes with his party 94% of the time. All right, let's talk briefly about John Bolton. 18 counts of mishandling classified information. Maura, is this revenge or justice?
Well, you know, you can debate all you want about the motives behind it, right? But that doesn't necessarily take away from any validity there. I think that the fact that there was an indictment means that John Bolton has the opportunity then to push back on those, right? He has the ability in our system of law, he is allowed to and has the right to defend himself. But I do think that it doesn't take away from the fact that this was valid enough to bring it up. So the fact that it is valid is a question mark. The motive does appear and feel as though it is personal. The president even kind of said so, but it doesn't mean that there's not an indictment worth having. And so he does need to explain to the American people what happened and defend himself pretty adamantly. I think that it's telling.
Yeah, Mark, when I saw that was supposed to be a DM to Pam Bondi and the president actually ended up tweeting out, I was like, oh, wow, he really is doing revenge. Then you read the indictment and you're like, oh, gosh, looks like John Bolton may have done some pretty bad things. Where do you fall down on this?
Well, too much stuff is classified, and the prosecution of people who mishandle classified information is too uneven for my taste. But there's no doubt that this indictment is not frivolous, whether it warranted being indicted, whether it would have happened if he weren't the president's enemy. I think that's pretty clear, but it doesn't mean he shouldn't have been indicted. It doesn't mean he won't be convicted. I'm just against lawfare in general, no matter who's bringing it and who the victim is. I think it's horrible for the country because, amongst other things, it's unfair to individuals and it undermines the rule of law.
And where does it stop?
Yeah.
Right? So.
And by the way, it's not a winning issue politically. Independents hate this stuff. All right, Mark Halperin, Maura Gillespie, stick with us because we'll have more with our panel coming up.
The fact that I was elected district attorney for 2 terms as the first woman elected attorney general of the state of California, ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. I was a United States Senator, second black woman elected in the history of the United States Senate, and I was the first woman vice president of the United States. Well, some people have actually said I was the most qualified candidate ever to run for president.
That's former Vice President Kamala Harris on reports that she was the, quote, most qualified candidate ever to run for president. This, of course, comes following her resounding defeat to President Trump last November. She lost the popular vote and every single battleground state for the first time since 2004. Back with me are Mark Halperin and Maura Gillespie. Mark, we call this part of the show the common ground segment because we think that there will be common ground around the issues that we bring up. And yet, as we three may sit here and sort of chuckle at Kamala Harris saying she was the most qualified person ever to run for president, her book did sell 350,000 copies, which leads me to my question, Mark. Perhaps we are the ones in the bubble and everybody else is sitting there lauding her immense expertise. What do you think?
I don't know much about much, but I know a lot about the book business. I have no idea how she sold that many copies.
It's amazing, right?
I really don't. So there's something there. I'd like to maybe do a focus group with 350,000. I got the studios big enough to fit them all to find out who they are, why they're buying it. But I can say this without fear of contradiction. She's definitely not the most qualified person ever to run for president. Not the least, but definitely not the most. For instance, a guy who was chair of the Senate Foreign Relations, chair of Senate Judiciary, and vice president for 8 years, Joe Biden. Just one example, I'd say more qualified.
Right. Maura, I mean, where are you on this? First of all, is she running for president again? And second of all, how excited are Republicans for her to run for president again?
By all means, she's welcome to do so. When she said that, I thought, you sound like Trump. I mean, honestly, for somebody who criticized him and talked about him being a showboat all the time, I don't know what that was, but you could have said that was a direct quote from Donald Trump, and I would have believed Joe just as well. I think that, to your point about how she sold those books, she was telling things about the Biden administration, the inner circle, and she unleashed. I think people were curious to see who else she named. I think that's probably a big part of it.
They're all in the news.
But I think, her going in and giving some dirt, that's what it came down to. It wasn't because it was this fascinating campaign in terms of being successful. Obviously, it wasn't. I think it was more about the inner circle and how close Jen Dillon O'Malley was, kind of holding the reins on things. I think people are just curious for that kind of inside knowledge and to know that she was willing to trash them.
Like, and who she was willing to trash.
And who she was willing to trash.
Yeah. Also on the common ground front, President Trump had a huge victory this week, securing the ceasefire in the Middle East, which seems to be holding the release of 20 hostages, live hostages from Gaza. Truly miraculous. Many Democrats didn't want to give him credit. The media sort of begrudgingly did. But then Time magazine came out with a cover, actually seeming to give him credit for this amazing victory. Here's that cover. President Trump had mixed feelings about it, though. On the one hand, I think he was glad to have been featured. On the other hand, he wrote on Truth Social that he was extremely disappointed with the photo that they chose. They disappeared my hair and then had something floating on top of my head that looked like a floating crown, but an extremely small one, really weird, hilarious, very typical, both of the media and of Trump. Mark, where is the president with regards to the media right now, and where is the media with regards to the president?
Ooh, can we expand the segment? He said on the trip, because he watched all the coverage on one of the flights, I think from Israel to Egypt, he said, for once you're giving me fair coverage. So I think right now he's feeling pretty good. Now, I have to take issue, as well as President Trump's psyche, he said he had mixed feelings about it. A bad picture would keep it from being mixed. I think in general, he would have passed on being the cover of Time because he hated the picture so much.
It was a pretty funny picture, but what's your analysis of how this immense, peace deal accomplishment has been greeted by the media? Do you feel that he's gotten a fair shake finally, or is he right that in his criticism that he's never really treated fairly by the media?
I was pleased to see that people took the moment then to see the bigger picture. These are 20 people, 20 families whose lives were so beautifully impacted. And so rather than continue with the political, let's do these slights here or there, focus on what's happened and what was accomplished. We don't know what the future holds for Gaza and for the people there, but those families of the hostages and those all who were impacted breathed a real sigh of relief. And that's something to celebrate. And so I was happy to see that. I think the president should be as well, regardless of the photo. I think that it's an accomplishment that he should be proud of, and we as Americans should be proud of to have played a role in that.
And finally, Mark, does the ceasefire deal make it more or less likely that the Democrats moderate on Israel and find their way back to the center?
A little bit more, because it takes some of the tension away, and maybe leaders can rebuild things. But the public opinion polls, I'll be watching them so closely to see, but not just Democrats, but also Republicans, whether Israel's place in the hearts of Americans rebounds at all. Because right now it's extremely grim, and I'm not sure that this piece bounces it back automatically.
Mark Halperin, Maura Gillespie, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Congratulations on your program.
Thank you so much. Up next, what point do stupid jokes turn offensive? We'll talk about a young Republican's text chat and the vice president's response after this. This week in our Media Moves segment, Politico dropped a bombshell when it revealed some truly vile text messages sent in a group chat whose members included young Republican leaders from across the country. The messages included references to rape as, quote, epic. They also called black people, quote, monkeys, the watermelon people, and they used the N-word. They joked about gas chambers, writing, quote, can we fix the showers? Gas chambers don't fit the Hitler aesthetic. Quote, I'm ready to watch people burn now. And, quote, we gotta pretend that we like them. Hey, come on in, take a nice shower and relax. Boom, they're dead. Many of the people in the chat have now been fired or forced to resign, and Republicans from across the country have condemned the statements, including Speaker Mike Johnson, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, and Virginia gubernatorial candidate Winsome Earl Sears. Seems like the obvious thing to do. But then there was Vice President J.D. Vance, who dismissed the hate as, quote, kids being kids.
The reality is that kids do stupid things, especially young boys. They tell edgy, offensive jokes like that's what kids do. And I really don't want us to grow up in a country where a kid telling a stupid joke, telling a very offensive stupid joke, is cause to ruin their lives.
Joining me now is conservative Gen Z whisperer and host of the After Party podcast, Emily Jashinsky. Emily, you're the only person I want to talk to about this, okay? Please explain to somebody who is hopelessly cringe like me why the vice president isn't just condemning these disgusting, disgusting chats.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the political level and the moral level. And on a political level, J.D. Vance is very online. He spends a lot of time on X, social media, from everything that I can tell. And part of the debate right now among conservatives is whether it's ever appropriate for someone on the right to come out and play the role of William F. Buckley, taking the Birchers, booting the Birchers, metaphorically, the John Birchers, out of the conservative movement, or if this is kind of seen as performative gatekeeping and should be unacceptable. So that's kind of the politics of J.D. Vance siding with people, especially in new right MAGA circles, who are done with performative gatekeeping. But even, now we get to the moral level, even people who, of course, believe that there's been a lot of virtue signaling and performative gatekeeping, which I'm actually one of those people, have to draw the line somewhere. And I think what we see here is J.D. Vance particularly repeatedly using the word kids, not meeting the moment that these weren't children. These are 20-somethings. Some of them, I think, are even older than 30 years old, who are working in the professional capacities in the Republican Party. So that takes it to a completely different level. This isn't private 16-year-olds having their dirty laundry aired when they were being dumb. These are people who are in a professional group chat and hold roles in actual, like, Republican politics.
Yeah, and on the political front, you know, these sort of, you know, the MAGA, the furthest to the right, who would have said, no, don't condemn this, you know, like, these are our people, right? Those aren't the people that the vice president is going to need to vote for him if the Republicans want to win in 2028. It's going to be people like you and me and independents who I think are really put off by this kind of thing, no?
No, I think you're right. Independents are really put off by this kind of thing because these are, I mean, there's all, Gen Z is just drowning in layers of irony to the point where it becomes, you know, difficult to figure out where the irony stops and starts. But I used to work in the conservative youth movement, and one of the things that always made me take more seriously the question of what we're talking about in front of younger Republicans. I assume some of these conservative activists, whatever they are, started around the COVID era. I assume that some of them were kids during COVID, Me Too, cancel culture, all of that. I actually think one of the reasons it is more important to gatekeep when you're talking to younger people is because their brains are developing, and drawing clear lines is helpful, since when your brain is developing, you don't pick up on the irony or the background of like 10 years of cancel culture that other people come into these conversations with. And so you just have to be extra careful so that you don't end up with people getting lost in the sauce, thinking this stuff is really funny. And when it all comes out, you're like, this is disgusting. This is going beyond politically incorrect banter in a group chat. You're joking about ovens and gas chambers, guys. Like, you are way beyond the boundaries of what could even be considered politically incorrect humor.
And I think I'm also very offended by the idea of them sort of proving the people on the left, right, who try to use this like Nazi pro-Hitler brush to paint the entire conservative movement. And I kept thinking, Emily, and I'm wondering if you think this is an apt comparison, how President Trump did the exact opposite during the campaign, to where when Project 2025 tried to sort of step in and say, this is our guy, we're winning, he said, actually, no, I don't believe in banning abortion, and actually, no, I don't believe in banning gay marriage. He did what a leader does, which is he set the line and said, actually, you know, the normies that I'm trying to win over are on this side of those issues, and I'm going to speak for them. I mean, that was real leadership, and that is such a contrast to what we're seeing here. Do you agree with this comparison?
It's really interesting because I was in the Oval Office yesterday. I asked Donald Trump on IVF. You know, many pro-lifers are already upset with this IVF policy. They have religious objections to it. And he said he took like 10 seconds on the question and moved right on. He was like, listen, this is the most pro-life thing you can do. And I think I may disagree with it, but Batya, that speaks to his instincts being actually stepping in, drawing like clear lines, not getting tangled up in the drama of all of it when it's not going to behoove him to get tangled in. He'll tangle in culture war drama when it's his political instincts are correctly understanding that he should, that it'll benefit him, but stays out, and he's very smart to stay out of things that he shouldn't. So, or politically that he shouldn't. So I think J.D. Vance, someone must have told him that these were like literal kids, and not, I would hope if he knew that these were people in their 20s and 30s working in their professional capacity, that it's worth it to just say, this is dumb, stop it. You don't have to act like it's a really big deal. You don't have to act like it's the end of the world. You don't have to say that this is the exact same thing as every university platforming Ibram X. Kendi saying all white people are necessarily racist, because it's not. But you can just say it's dumb and bad, stop doing it, cut it out, and move on.
Emily, thank you so much. That was so brilliant. Ahead, President Trump, the dealmaker-in-chief, seems to struggle with the art of the deal stateside. We began with what we learned about America this week, and we end with what we're looking toward next week. On Friday, President Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and he plans to meet with Russia's President Vladimir Putin later this week in Hungary. The hope is for him to finally bring that horrific war to a close, as he has with so many other conflicts. Here at home, though, the president hasn't been quite as successful. Whereas his deal-making abroad has focused on marrying conflicting sets of interests, that's proven harder when it comes to his domestic opposition and the government shutdown. Republicans blame Democrats for refusing to first keep the government open, then negotiate the terms of a deal. And they may be right. But to the hundreds of thousands of Americans showing up to work without collecting a paycheck, this squabbling over whose fault it is really moot. Once the Democrats represented the working class and the Republicans were the party of the rich. But that's no longer the case now. The GOP is the party of the working class, of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, while the Democrats are the party of people with assets and savings. This is a privilege for the GOP, but it's also a responsibility. There's no shame in the president finding 8 more Democrats who also want to help those Americans who are struggling to make ends meet and make a deal. If he can get Hamas to the table with Israel, he should be able to get a few more Democrats too. That will be the real test of his power in the coming week. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It's been an honor to have you. May God bless and protect you and the United States of America.